the afternoon session of the 9th of September Portland City Council meeting. Carla, would you please call the roll? Or Keelan?
Hardesty?
Here.
Udaly?
Here.
Wheeler? Fritz?
Here. The mayor read the statement this morning. I'm currently the president of the council, so he read the statement as far as why we're holding electronic meetings, and so I'm going to just carry that over to this morning, from this morning. If the city attorney could please read the rules of order and decorum.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical delay. Microsoft wanted my code this afternoon, and I had to scramble to figure out what my code was. For starting without me, I appreciate that. We have 2 items on the agenda today. Carla, can you read items 703 and 704, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor. Prohibit the acquisition and use of face recognition technologies by city bureaus. And 704, prohibit the use of face recognition technologies by private entities in public places, accommodation in the city.
Colleagues, we are here this afternoon to consider 2 ordinances that seek to ban the use of facial recognition technologies by our own Portland city government and by private entities in the public spaces. Many will remember that we held a council work session on this subject back in January. At that work session, we heard powerful stories from community members about the real impacts of facial recognition technologies. We heard from experts how unreliable the current technology is in identifying faces of women and people of color in particular, and we were given examples of arrest charges and the sullying of people's reputations, all based on false positives. With that in mind, the city brings the first policy in the nation that delves into the impacts of emergent technologies in civil liberties. These ordinances are the first step forward in policy development in response to technological innovation. Though the Portland City Council has had our first deep dive into facial recognition technologies in January, the Smart City PDX team, along with their city partners and diverse voices of Portlanders, have been at this work for well over a year. I want to thank everyone in the community who's involved and is engaged with their time and their energy. Portland is far from an anti-technology city, and I want to make that very clear. We are not anti-technology. With a wide array of local and national tech companies, we are one of the fastest growing tech hubs anywhere on the West Coast. We simply demand that our technology protect our information properly while providing the digital services that we need. All Portlanders are entitled to a city government that will not use technology with demonstrated racial and gender biases that endanger personal privacy. These proposals are a clear and urgent first step in implementing the City of Portland's privacy and information protection principles, which were approved in 2019. In addition, because Portland is a city of innovation, we will seek to collaborate with innovators and technology makers that design facial recognition technology to implement products that Portlanders can trust and use safely. Technology that focuses on privacy and people first can be a key component to help us resolve our current challenges, as well as plan for an equitable future. Before we hear from our city colleagues, I'd like to pass this to Commissioner Hardesty, who's been a champion of these policies and a fantastic co-leader in developing these ordinances. Commissioner Hardesty, hello again.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. I am so excited by our opportunity that we have here today. I also want to say that I am very proud to have partnered with the mayor to bring these two measures before the city council and to enact as law in our great city. The mayor has covered a lot of what I was going to say because he always looks at my notes before I give them. But let me just say that I do want to reiterate the fact that where we are today with facial recognition technology is that women, and specifically Black women, continue to be totally misidentified. In many cases, they're identified as men. And so the darker your skin complexion, the more likely the facial recognition technology will misidentify you. In addition to that, I do not think any parent wants their kids' biometric data sold on the open market to the highest bidder without any consideration about whether or not permission has been granted and whether or not the family wants their young kids' biometric data to be used in that manner. As the mayor said, we are a pro-technology city. But what we've seen so far in practice with this technology, it just continues to exacerbate the over-criminalization of Black and brown people in our community. I welcome a day in Portland where innovative technologists will come with some technology that has no racially unequitable outcomes. The day that happens will be the day I'm happy to look at revising the ban. Until then, until we get it right, there should be no exceptions to why this is bad for our community. I will have additional statements after we've heard from all the incredible public people here who want to testify. We've received lots and lots of letters in support of these two bans. This measure will ensure facial recognition will not be used in this city until the above problems that have been laid out have been addressed and have been verified by independent sources, not just by people who want to sell something to us. In concluding my opening remarks, I would like to make a motion to add an emergency clause to item 704. There is already an effective date in item 704. So the emergency clause will allow us to vote on both items simultaneously while still allowing any businesses employing facial recognition technology to discontinue its use. Voting on both matters today will allow the community members who are joining us today to not only hear about why this is important, but also to be present as we vote on this important legislation. And there's no need not to do it all in one fell swoop. So I will repeat, I am making a motion to add an emergency clause to item 704. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been seconded by Commissioner Fritz. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll get on to the presentation.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Durbin. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Commissioners and members of the public that have joined us today. I'm Andrea Durbin, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. BPS leads the Smart City PDX program, which focuses on bringing digital justice to Portland and for all Portlanders. We believe that digital rights are essential for a more equitable, participatory, and engaged community. Over the last year, we have organized several community sessions and have started to take the first steps to implement the city's privacy and information protection principles that Council approved in 2019. Today, you'll learn the specifics about two proposals that address the use of facial recognition technology. One will ban the use of facial recognition technologies by city government, and another will ban the use of these technologies by private entities in public spaces. We sought the input of those most impacted by facial recognition technologies and prioritized protecting them in the development of these proposals. Collaborative and participatory policymaking processes were used in research and policy development, including 2 council work sessions and a policy workshop. With that valuable community feedback, we were able to shape the proposals by basing them on lived experiences of members in our community. As a public agency, we can best serve Portlanders by encouraging the development of responsible technologies that do not discriminate. We can create an expectation and standard that these technologies must start with the privacy and information protection by design from the beginning. That is why this proposal is so important. We need to take a stand and be clear that these technologies need to improve and not discriminate. These technologies also need to document testing and evaluation. And until that happens, the ban of these technologies in public and private uses in public spaces is essential. What we know is that indiscriminate use of these technologies threatens civil liberties and is biased against Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women, and elders. And we know that it is important to acknowledge the harm in the use of these technologies, and by doing so, we can help spur the industry to fix the inherent bias and discrimination so that these technologies will work better. By adopting these 2 ordinances, the City of Portland will join other cities in the adoption of the public ban and lead the way nationally and internationally to be the first city to ban the private use of this technology in public spaces. That is squarely where we should be. The Office of Equity and Human Rights has been a vital partner in this work, and we thank them for their guidance during the policy development phase. And I'd like to now introduce my colleague from the Office of Equity and Human Rights, Dr. Markeisha Smith, to hear more about how these ordinances will advance our racial justice work while inviting the development of responsible technology. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Director Durbin.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, City Commissioners, Director Durbin. I'm Markeisha Smith, Director for the Office of Equity and Human Rights. On June 17th of this year, City Council adopted the City of Portland's core values. Anti-racism is the very first of those listed values. What does anti-racism look like? Many things, but in this instance, it looks like the ordinances that are presented to you today and the processes that led to them. In developing the public use ban, there was a rigorous process to include the public in the development of the ordinance, centering the voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. Council held a work session on the public ban on facial recognition technology, and frontline organizations that serve BIPOC communities made it clear that they needed the city to go further and adopt a privacy ban as well. Being anti-racist means following the lead of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities as they identify the needs of their communities. Being anti-racist means that understanding through the use of root cause analysis that the history of surveillance in this country is rooted in slavery, with the earliest examples of controlling the movement of enslaved people being the slave past. Being anti-racist means assuring the safety of BIPOC communities first. There are now and will continue to be solutions using technology that purport to address safety and advance well-being and opportunity as we encourage the use of technology for these purposes when it is clear that the technology will serve all of the people in our community. And that means centering the safety and well-being of BIPOC communities first. It is essential that we proceed with a safety-first approach, and these ordinances do just that. Thank you for your time. Now I think I'm turning it over to Judith.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, Director Durbin and Smith, and our guests. I'm Judith Mowry. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of Equity and Human Rights.
Thank you. My name is Hector Dominguez. I am the Open Data Coordinator and part of the Smart City PDX team. Our team, as Director Durbin mentioned, is part of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
And Hector's now going to share his screen.
I'm going to share my screen. Thank you.
Slideshow. Thank you. Today, Smart City PDX, in collaboration with the Office of Equity and Human Rights and the City Attorney's Office, bring two policies that ban the use of face recognition technologies due to known racial biases, which run counter to city values and privacy concerns. Privacy is a human right. This is represented in Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Building robust public trust among people and organizations is essential to creating a sustainable and just future. Today, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people are over-surveilled and underrepresented in tech. The city has an important role in the creation of safe and welcoming public spaces for all. Why ban face recognition technologies? FRT relies on biometric information. There are no legal protection framework exists in Oregon. Minors are particularly vulnerable. Hundreds of technology providers use algorithms that show bias against Black people, women, the elderly, and people with disabilities. Algorithms can harm, discriminate, and limit access to the benefits of technology.
And why ban face recognition technologies in Portland? Well, false positives can be hard to mitigate or remediate when this technology is part of a data pipeline in law enforcement. Use of biased and untested technology may constrain access to public spaces to Portlanders. And Portlanders deserve technology that protects their information without creating extra and unknown risk to them due to potential privacy data breaches. These proposals were developed in an inclusive, open, and participatory process. These ordinances would ban the use of face recognition by City Bureau and by private entities in public spaces. Ban of face recognition technologies used by city government would become effective immediately, while the ban on private use of face recognition would become effective on January 1st, 2021. The ban on private use of face recognition would apply to businesses offering public accommodations as defined by Oregon law and federal ADA law. These policies led to the creation of a new code title, City Code Title number 34 on digital justice. Everyone has the right to be treated fairly by public and private entities of all kinds, particularly in technology and information systems. Portland is a place of technology innovation. The city is elevating digital justice for groups and individuals. Tech solutions in Portland must comply with higher standards in privacy and information technology. Industry and communities must collaborate to build model technologies based on trust. Smart City PDX will coordinate technology literacy efforts. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Office of Equity and Human Rights will provide privacy assessment services for city bureaus and begin inclusive community engagement to design a comprehensive surveillance technologies policies. Now, commissioners, we are open to questions regarding these policies.
Very good. And we also have some invited testimony, but before we get to that invited testimony, does anybody have questions at this particular moment? All right, good. And this is not the last chance. Thank you both for your testimony. We appreciate it. And with that, we'll hear from some invited testimony. First up, we have Sarah Hamid from CARE Oregon. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, awesome. So my name is Sarah Hamid. Thank you for having me today. I sit on the board of and am speaking to y'all on behalf of CARE Oregon. Like many in the CARE Oregon community, I'm a child of immigrants, which means that my childhood is rife with parables of entrepreneurship, innovation, and the value of individual initiative. And innovation hubs like Portland is this place to me where you can take your ideas and apply grit and focus and innovate your way to the American dream. But marketing technologies is entirely different from inventing them, because marketing oftentimes involves finding problems after the fact that people can then apply to the technologies. And in order to sell those technologies, those problems are always urgent, widely relevant, and super important to the consumer. And the thing is that people often forget about technologies is that they have histories, and oftentimes what they're marketed for has no relationship to the institutions, issues, or individuals that were involved in the innovation process. The technologies almost have an amnesiac effect on consumers. We forget that they have a history. Facial recognition has a particularly fraught history, as many people have already discussed. It's a history that predates hand-free driving and COVID-19. It's a history that includes biometric databases that track new immigrants, racialized rogue galleries that criminalize communities, and the persistent need of the state after 9/11 to know who travels, where they travel to, and whether or not they have a Muslim-sounding last name. It's no accident that facial recognition criminalizes Portland's over-policed communities. That's not an edge case. That's the core functionality of this technology. Portland, along with the entire country, is in the midst of a very important conversation right now with regards to public safety and how we are reimagining public safety for ourselves. With the leadership of folks like Commissioner Hardesty, we're asking hard and difficult questions about how we want to address issues like mental health crises and housing insecurity. And as we're wont to, Portland is positioning itself as kind of a different place. We're a sanctuary city. We're a city that believes that human crises should be dealt with humanely. And we're a city that thrives because of diversity and difference. These ordinances are unprecedented, and no other city in the country has taken a stand like this against the use of this dangerous technology in our public spaces. We as Portlanders are not okay with public safety for some and not for others. We're not okay with letting small businesses have a fragile sense of security when the reality is we need to be asking and resolving why their businesses are not receiving the police protection they pay taxes for in the first place. Facial recognition does not solve the issue of poor police service distribution. We're also not okay with empowering aggressive and abusive immigration enforcement and detention that victimizes our immigrant and Muslim communities just so we can unlock our phones a few seconds quicker. I urge everyone involved here to take a stand on behalf of Portlanders and to refuse and capitulate to clever marketing that puts our communities at risk. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mayor.
That was bound to happen today, wasn't it? Thank you, Sarah, for your testimony. That was great. And unlike me, we actually heard your testimony, which is fantastic. Our next invited testimony is Babatunde Azubuike from Freedom to Thrive. Welcome.
Hey there. Thanks for everyone for having me. I wanted to talk to you all today about the facial recognition. I have calling for a citywide ban on facial recognition technology in the public and the private areas. We're living in an age of e-carceration. E-carceration is short for electronic incarceration. This is when authorities like police or immigration agents use technology to track and monitor people. With the use of this tech, law enforcement officers can use mobile devices to capture faces, face-ready recognition photographs of the people they stop on the street, surveillance cameras, both real-time face scanning and identification capabilities. The FBI also has access to hundreds of millions of facial recognition images of law-abiding community members. In many places and spaces, the adaptation of facial recognition technologies like these have occurred without meaningful oversight, without proper accurate testing of the systems that they are actually used in the field, and without the enhancement of legal protections to prevent their misuse. They can even be used to reinforce the biases that business owners have against certain individuals. This has led to the development of unproven, inaccurate systems that impinge on constitutional rights and disproportionately impact people of color. The FBI's Interstate Photo System and Face Services Unit exemplifies these problems. The minimal testing conducted by the Bureau showed that IPS was incapable of accurate identification at least 15% of the time. This has real-world impacts. An inaccurate system will implicate people of crimes they didn't commit, forcing them to prove their innocence and shifting their traditional burden of proof away from the government. This threat will likely disproportionately impact people of color. We've seen it. Facial recognition misidentifies Black and Indigenous people of color, young people, women, folks with disabilities at much higher rates than white folks, older people, and men, respectively. Due to the years of well-documented racially biased police practices, all criminal databases, including mugshot databases, include a disproportionate number of African Americans, Latinx folks, and immigrants. These two facts mean that folks of color will likely shoulder exponentially more of the burden of the IPS system's inaccuracies than whites. Despite these challenges, the FBI for years has also failed to be transparent about the use of facial recognition technology. It's taken 7 years to update the privacy impact assessment for IPS that didn't release until 1 year after the system was fully functional. And the public had no idea how the images were being used. Without transparency and accountability and proper security protocols in place, facial recognition systems may be subject to misuse. This has happened in 2010 when ICE enlisted police officers to use license plate reader to gather information about gun show customers. In Florida in 2011, more than 100 officers accessed driver and vehicle information for a female state trooper who arrested a Miami police officer for speeding. At a state audit that same year, law enforcement's accessed driver's information in Minnesota revealed that half of law enforcement personnel in Minnesota had misused the driving records. I mention all of this because we're in a moment of political strife on this land where many of us are calling for radical change to how we address the safety concerns in our communities. I hope that my testimony has demonstrated where some of the problems with facial recognition technology is, as well as how it can be used to target marginalized communities and strip them of their dignity. Those of us who are Black, young, Latinx, women, or immigrants already carry the burden of being targeted by police, federal agents, white supremacists, in addition to being ignored when our experiences of bias, hate, and surveillance arise. I support the public ban on facial recognition technology, as well as a private ban in the name of safety for everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Babatunde. Appreciate your testimony today and your leadership. And our last invited testimony is Brian Hoffer from the Oakland Privacy Advisory Commission, Secure Justice. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Brian Hofer. I'm the Executive Director of Secure Justice, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates against state abuse of power. And I chair the City of Oakland's Privacy Commission. I urge you to support both ordinances that would prohibit public and private use of facial recognition.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, can I make correct? You're breaking up a bit. Could you turn off the video and maybe we'll be able to hear you better?
Yeah. Let's see if I can go. Can you hear me okay that way?
Yeah, it's a little better. Let's try that.
Okay. Sorry about that. Secure Justice was part of the team behind the bans in San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and Alameda. And I really want to thank Hector Dominguez, Judith Mowry, and the Smart City PDX team for continuing a conversation with Bay Area folks to discuss what we went through down here. The letter in your agenda packet contains our full commentary, so I just want to highlight on a couple points. We rarely learn of harm from surveillance technology until long after the fact. Examples like COINTELPRO or the NYPD training cameras onto the front doors of mosques, we don't discover those things until years later. We recommend the suggested amendments in our letter to your enforcement provision to better curtail such misconduct. Secondly, I anticipate that your negotiations are coming down to a moratorium or ban decision like we faced in the Bay Area. And I want to suggest that it's not inevitable that technology dominate our lives, and it's not hypocritical or anti-innovation to regulate some technologies while prohibiting the use of others that Portland finds are inappropriate. We have never before granted such power to the government to give them the ability to track our every move the minute we leave the house. I would argue that it's adverse to a healthy democracy, and that the power shift between the government and the people from use of this technology is too radical. The expensive part of a mass surveillance system is already in place. Cameras are ubiquitous. The moratorium folks would like us to believe that this tool could be used appropriately in narrow circumstances, and maybe that's true, but it's misleading. No tool this versatile has ever been successfully confined to one or two uses for very long. Mission creep is historical reality. We know that all systems of mass surveillance throughout history have been abused. We know that all tyrannical governments have used mass surveillance to suppress dissent. Our Bay Area Coalition acknowledged that the technology will certainly improve as to accuracy, and it's equally as concerning as wrongful arrest due to misidentification if we're forced to live in a mass surveillance ecosystem. A moratorium sends a signal to the market that these technologies should continue to be developed, and that conflicts with the tech workers' revolutions that we're seeing at many of these same companies as they're beginning to understand the powerful impact and the harmful impact of their technologies used by the wrong people. I really applaud Portland for addressing the private side of this technology's use. We've seen discriminatory practices play out across the country, from bakers refusing to serve same-sex couples a wedding cake, or Black people not being served at restaurants. Facial recognition in the hands of private actors will be gasoline added to a racial fire. Many of our country's most important civil rights laws pertain to private actors for a reason, because there's equally as much harm possible as those that have police power. The moratorium crowd insists that facial recognition be discussed in a vacuum. But as responsible elected officials, you cannot ignore that America has a significant problem with racism, that our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts Black and brown bodies, that surveillance technology is used more on Black and brown bodies, and that prosecutor and police misconduct are real. In the absence of change to our entire system, facial recognition, no matter how accurate, is not going to be safe to use in our communities. Thank you for listening.
Brian, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to testify today. Commissioner Hardesty has a question or a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I also wanted to take a moment to appreciate Brian because he helped us at the very beginning during our work session really think outside of the box that even he finds himself in. And I am very grateful that he told us what was working and what wasn't working with his commission, and he gave us the opportunity to think bigger and broader. I appreciate all the invited testimony, but I wanted to give Brian a special thank you because without him being as open and honest as he was, we would not have moved as courageously as we have. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Brian, Babatunde, Sarah. Thank you, all three of you, for your invited testimony. Colleagues, any questions before we open this up to public testimony? Very good. Carla, how many folks do we have signed up this afternoon?
We had about 22 register, but I see about 19 are on the line.
All right. So let's do some quick math. Let's go ahead and give people 3 minutes. I think we have time for that.
Okay.
All right. Well, hang on. I'm seeing some dissent. Let's do this. I'm seeing hand signals for 2 minutes. Let's do 2 minutes, but I won't really be draconian about it. If you're still making your point, we'll let you make your point, but let's aim for 2 minutes, and that way we'll get through this and get to the vote before we lose the quorum. First individual, please, Carla.
First person is Larry Kirsch.
Good afternoon, Larry. Carla, I'm not seeing Larry.
I see him at the top there.
I see him. Hi, Larry.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Larry Kirsch. I'm a resident of Portland. By profession, I'm an economist. I focus mainly on issues of consumer protection policy. I have no interest, financial or otherwise, in the area of face recognition technologies. I'm not here on behalf of anybody other than myself. My brief remarks today, together with the more extensive written comments I submitted on August 24th, focuses broadly on the public policy process leading to today's hearing. I'm not here to comment on any particular face recognition product, nor am I in a position to draw specific conclusions about the performance of any product or class of products in the marketplace, pro or con. Let me begin by commending City Council, Smart City PDX, and the other city agencies involved in today's hearing for initiating this review of face recognition technologies. Under your leadership, the city, with the engagement of diverse communities, has begun a cautionary review of the threats face recognition technologies could pose to civil liberties, civil rights, and other fundamental interests. The purpose of this anticipatory analysis is timely and highly warranted in light of the public interest implicated and laudable for its broad scope. Unfortunately, the initial results embedded in today's ordinances fall short in important ways. I hope to alert you to some of them and will conclude with several recommendations. I begin by highlighting a couple of aspects of the draft ordinance and will underscore what I regard as several of its major flaws. The proposed ordinance calls for immediate, time-unlimited ban, not a moratorium, on the use of face recognition technologies, both by city agencies and private entities, meeting the definition of public accommodations. The proposed ordinances refer in categorical terms to the performance standards and criteria the city deems relevant to face recognition products. They include, but are not limited to, accuracy, privacy, discriminatory design, and biased use. Turning to major flaws, I think the city might be on more solid ground imposing a product ban were it able to establish an immediate threat to the public health or safety based on sound data, objective testing, expert evaluation, and or other accepted types of evidence. I recognize, of course, the importance of individual experience. I believe the foundation is far weaker when the city invokes a ban predicated on speculation, assumptions, allegations, and conclusions not grounded in reliable facts. While I don't know all the evidence the city is relying on, I would say it hasn't put forward the kind of empirical risk data and analysis that would be most persuasive under the circumstances. In the instant case, while the city has identified some nominal elements of threat, for example, inaccurate face identifications, it does not define maximum levels of risk it would be willing to accept, such as the maximum false positive identification rate. Nor has it provided objective evidence that these threats are in fact present in the specific brands of face recognition in the marketplace.
That's 3 minutes.
Testing. I'm sorry?
That's 3 minutes. Did you have one more point you wanted to close on?
Okay, sure. Well, let me just, I'll turn to why I have two very short points. Just three very important arguments for why we.
Can you do it in one sentence?
Okay, I'll rest with what I've got. I've submitted written testimony. I think the city would really do best to impose a time-limited moratorium and invoke and start a process for responsible use that would define the criteria and the standards the city is really looking for.
All right, great.
Blunt instrument of a ban.
Thank you, and we'll read your written testimony, of course,
Sure.
as well. Thank you. Next individual, please, Carla.
Nathan Sheard.
Good afternoon, Nathan.
Hello, my name is Nathan Sheard. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and our over 30,000 members. The Electronic Frontier Foundation strongly supports legislation that bans government agencies and employees from using face surveillance technology. We thank the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Hardstein, each of you for your attention to this critical issue. Face surveillance is profoundly dangerous for many reasons. In tracking our faces, a unique marker that we cannot change and invades our privacy and safety. Courts have long recognized that government that government surveillance of First Amendment activity has a deterrent effect on the exercise of fundamental First Amendment freedoms, and surveillance technologies have an unfair, disparate impact against people of color, migrants, and other vulnerable populations. Thus, face surveillance is so dangerous that governments must not use it at all. We support the aims of this ordinance and respectfully seek 3 amendments to assure that the bill will appropriately protect the rights of Portland residents. First, the private right of action requires that someone experience harm before they can initiate the enforcement process. The intent of this ordinance is to protect the public before they have been harmed by technology that threatens their privacy, safety, and fundamental freedoms. Requiring that a person experience these harms before they can access the accountability measures is antithetical to that aim. EFF respectfully asks that the language be amended to allow any resident the opportunity to initiate the accountability and enforcement process, specifically by amending Part L, Paragraph 1, to read, any person may institute proceedings against the city alleging a violation of this ordinance in a court of competent jurisdiction. Second, the private right of action does not provide fee shifting for a prevailing plaintiff. Without fee shifting, the only private entities with access to the enforcement process will be well-heeled advocacy organizations, wealthy and otherwise privileged individuals. To mitigate this disparity and empower all Portland residents with appropriate support, EFF respectfully asks that the language be included to award reasonable attorney fees to a prevailing plaintiff. And lastly, as currently written, it is unclear if the prohibition on bureaus allowing a non-city entity to use face recognition technologies on city-owned property extends to private use or is limited to non-covered government agencies. The better approach to private sector use of face surveillance is to require informed opt-in consent. Thus, EFF respectfully requests the language be amended to more clearly prohibit non-city government bodies from using face recognition technology on city-owned property. In closing, EFF once again thanks you all for your efforts to protect the people of Portland from this particularly pernicious form of mass surveillance. We look forward to seeing an ordinance passed that bans government use of face surveillance in Portland, and will enthusiastically support the ordinance prohibiting the use of face recognition technology by city bureaus with the noted amendments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate your testimony. Next person, Carla.
Next is Mauro Savatopoulos.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks. I was just here listening. I don't actually have anything to contribute today.
Very good. It's awesome you're here. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Then we'll go with Chris Bushek.
This is Chris Bushek, Mayor Wheeler and honorable members of Portland City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here on behalf of PDX Privacy, which is a Portland-based group of local residents who care deeply about issues related to privacy. We're concerned about the collection, use, and potential abuse of personal data by both businesses and government, and biometrics are especially concerning to us. Therefore, I'm here to offer our support for this ordinance to prohibit the acquisition and use of face recognition technologies by city bureaus. Facial recognition and other surveillance technologies are often promoted as a means to ensure public safety. While there may be cases where this can be true, we must also ask, safety for whom? These technologies are most frequently deployed in communities that are home to marginalized groups of people and against people for whom it is least accurate, people of color, women, and children. There must be other less invasive ways to keep our communities safe. The abundance of cameras throughout the city makes tracking our everyday movements quite easy. Such relentless and constant monitoring negatively impacts privacy in many ways and can cause direct ongoing harm, resulting in a chilling effect on our actions and associations with other people. Companies that manufacture facial recognition systems often insist that this technology is the only path forward, but omnipresent face surveillance is not inevitable. You all have the power to stop its creep, and we ask you to listen to your constituents and take action now. Please ban facial recognition use by government agencies, and then in the near future, work to develop a broader surveillance ordinance that takes into account other biometrics such as heartbeat, gait, and other mutable personal characteristics, and also considers the acquisition and use of other surveillance technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Next is Jason Hill.
Welcome.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you. I was actually just here to listen, but let's see. That's a picture of my cat. See if I can get a picture of me. Actually, my ex-cat. It's my ex-wife. But my time is ticking, so I will talk. So, I mean, I agree that the racial bias is particularly concerning, but just as a white male, I would like to add that I'm definitely feel negatively affected by the fact that I know that I'm under surveillance when I'm anywhere, be it public or private, and it greatly influences my behavior and the manner in which I interact with people in the community in ways that I can't fully understand yet, but I have no access to that surveillance information, so I have no idea what's being watched. I think I was greatly influenced by a book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, who I think said it very well when he said, if we have no control over who watches us, what they watch, and when we have no ability to act in the present or plan for the future, whoever controls our privacy can humiliate you and disrupt your relationships at will. No one, except perhaps a tyrant, has a private life that can survive public exposure by a hostile directive. Again, that's a quote from Timothy Snyder. And, you know, the idea that we're only going to have the government lose access, or I feel like allowing the private sector to have access to this very powerful technology can be just as bad, given that our government is heavily influenced by the private sector as having the government with that power. So I guess my vote would be to ban facial recognition technology altogether. And I understand that that would be seen as reducing innovation, but I do not think all innovations are positive. Clearly, to me, blanket surveillance of your every move, you know, it simply makes existing less enjoyable. I can tell you that from my personal experience. I don't know if others have it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And just to clarify, we're taking up two separate ordinances here today. The first one is specific to the city of Portland and prohibiting the use of facial recognition technologies. Item 704 does in fact cover the private sector. So we're looking at both options here.
However, the private sector will be allowed to use facial recognition technology in private settings, correct?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, right. Thank you.
So does that include the sidewalk in front of Starbucks? Because if it includes the sidewalks in front of the stores, that's pretty much everywhere I walk. So. Yeah,
and Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would include those areas as well, correct? Any use of facial recognition technology.
Mayor, it would cover every place where the ADA is applied. That's kind of the consistency. Sidewalks, I don't think would be covered, but you know, stores and public places, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And Jason, thank you for raising that issue. I appreciate it. I see your point now.
Next is Edith Gillis.
Edith, welcome back. I thought you'd had enough of this morning.
Hello, I'm so grateful for you doing this work. I want to say that no software improvements over time would ever result in correct ID or our public safety. Especially, I would like to give some examples from my own experience of criminals who have hurt my family. You already have read the National Institute of Standards and Technology showing that with face masks, the ID of the best of the 89 systems have failed over half of the time. You've already read the updates to the Tech Explorer, the 10 reasons you should be worried about facial recognition. But I want to, and you've read the ACLU. So you have the facts, you have the evidence, but I want to give you some personal experiences. In 1993, my 2.5-year-old daughter, my 7.5-year-old son were, according to the Portland Northeast Precinct homicide detective, quote, kidnapped to be sold into prostitution for drug money, unquote. The stranger who kidnapped them would not have been ID'd under the best of the security systems that are now, or if you used all of the 89 best ones combined, would have not been able to identify her. She is darker than most African Americans, uses distracting and changing wigs and makeup and jewelry. The software is wrong, as you know, all the time anyway, but especially when you combine it with someone who is intentionally trying to hide that. Even though the system had many mugshots of this person and many pictures of her on the streets, it would have failed. Secondarily, most of the imprisoned pedophiles are white males. The pale males are better identified, but they use these use police uniforms and security uniforms where there's already a set-in bias by those who create the software and examine the results to not have them properly identified. Thirdly, the software would have failed to identify my white abusive psychopath ex-husband who had strangers rape me when he had me unknowingly drugged. He avoided photographs, and as a psychopath, he could disarm, charm, manipulate, terrorize, extort people, so there were no photo trails for them to do photo matches. He stayed out of the public view his later years in his life, but behind the scenes could do a lot of harm. He would use distracting hair and beard and mannerisms so that people, so there weren't photographs, but people couldn't get him. Next, the software would not have worked with another rapist who was also, as my husband, working in the legal profession. He was politically connected, criminal defense attorney from Texas. He would move and blur the photos. He would make distracting facial expressions. He would tilt his head to be in the shade, and he'd tilt his hair. He was arrested very often and did have mugshots, but none of those were valid or be able to be used for ID. He would use legal technicalities to get off of it, to purge the system. He would have excuses about his glasses, or there would be hiding of.
That's 3 minutes.
The software could not be made to be working correctly identifying people. My 2 daughters, I know very well, have had photographs of them. They're gorgeous, they're beautiful, I know them, and yet most of the time they take photographs of them, I would not be able to recognize the photographs. And this is before one of them had cosmetic surgery, and most of my adults that I care for, when they take in and out their dentures or change their wigs, it's hard to identify them anyway. This is not even counting about the people who use tattoos, paint, makeup, and purposeful identification changes.
Thank you, Edith. We appreciate it. And Kevin wanted to make a clarification, so I'm going to take a mayoral privilege here and let him jump in for 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Wheeler. Kevin Martin from Smart City PDX. I just wanted to clarify the question around sidewalks. It was a little confusing, but Jason raised it in the testimony. So the policy on private use would cover public places like sidewalks. So businesses like Starbucks would not be able to use facial recognition on the sidewalks in front of their businesses. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you for that perspective. Appreciate it. Next individual, please, Carla.
Is Cynthia Spies.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Spies, an independent security researcher and Seattle resident. My comments are regarding agenda items 703 and 704. As someone who looks forward to every opportunity to visit Portland, I hope that Portland takes the confident step forward for democracy and bans both the public and private use of facial recognition technology. Pervasive surveillance impedes active and fair civic participation. People should be free to move about their days without being tracked every time they go to City Hall, the bus station, shopping center, parks, hotels, and so on. More and more cities are adopting facial recognition bans. The public doesn't want this technology. Moreover, biometric data should not be considered lightly. At least in a data breach of credit card numbers or passwords, the victims can get new cards or generate new passwords. You only have one face. What is the recourse for victims when they say the grocery store's facial recognition system is security breached? Additionally, informed consent doesn't exist in many of the ways that facial recognition technology would otherwise be deployed. Even if businesses posted signs saying they were using the technology, how would it be ensured that the public who don't read English know that they're consenting to their biometric data being gathered? What about elderly and or disabled individuals who can't see the signage? Besides the point that access to services provided by places of public accommodation should not require individuals to forfeit their biometric data. Overall, the safest approach is prevention of these problems by banning the technology. Businesses have existed for centuries without this technology. None of the claims of supposed economic advantage for using this technology are substantiated. This is entirely optional technology with the very real possibility of harm to individuals and the erosion of democracy. Not to mention the unequal negative impact would most likely be shouldered by the communities already facing the greatest disadvantage. The cons vastly outweigh any supposed pros. Facial recognition technology should not be allowed to proliferate. A true democracy thrives with the most engaged, informed, and participatory public. However, facial recognition technology and other surveillance technology silences the public, thus erasing our civil liberties. Mass surveillance must be stopped. Make it stop today in Portland. Please approve both bans. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, and we appreciate you visiting Portland as well.
Next is Dan Handelman.
Hi, Dan. This is your daily double as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. This is Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Portland Cop Watch sent in written comments. I'll try to summarize them in the 2 minutes we have. But we've had a lot of concerns over the years about surveillance by law enforcement. We are not convinced that what you're passing today are actually outright bans. There are limitations with loopholes in them. We sent our general policy to you earlier in the year, raising concerns about fielding out images to private companies like Facebook and the possible violation of state laws around looking at people's immigration status or the political, religious, and social affiliations. We agree that it is very concerning that this technology has been proven to be inaccurate when it comes to identifying women and people of color, but there's also the wider reality of the threat created by private entities and the government tracking community members, regardless of whether there's criminal behavior involved. There are fundamental issues of privacy and a so-called democratic society at stake. So even if this technology is fixed, whatever kind of ban or limit that you have in place should remain. I keep hearing that if it gets fixed, you want to undo this. I also want to clarify, we sent our earlier comments to the smart city people and not directly to the Office of Equity and Human Rights, but these were the comments we made, which we did not see addressed in what you're reviewing today. In the Council Direct Section F of the public ordinance, it says that social media applications are limited by a human resources policy, and it's not clear whether that can be used as a means for law enforcement to circumvent the law that you're passing today. Sections L and M are implicitly say that there will be discipline for employees who violate the code, but we think that should be made explicit. Also, Section L states that notice will post it to a city website of violations, but it doesn't say that the complainant is going to be informed of the outcome of the complaint. We also think that you should be very, very clear in this hearing and in this ordinance that the City of Portland does not regulate other jurisdictions like the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Oregon State Police, multnombre sheriffs, or the federal government who have been in town with their own cameras, and that will not be banned by this ordinance. The public use draft also implies in Section G that a city agency receiving information has to verify that information wasn't ascertained through facial recognition, but we think that should be explicit as well and not just implied. And finally, in the private use code, we think that private actors should be told in that code that they're not allowed to use the technology to identify people to any city agency, including the Portland Police, just to make it clear that they can't hand over somebody that they identified using this technology. I really think that even if this technology correctly identifies people in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, it will still be used to over-police those communities. So having the misidentification problem is one issue, but then how the technology is applied is going to exist even if it gets fixed. And I hope that you will make some changes to the ordinances based on what we've said.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for your thoughtfulness on that. Commissioner Hardesty has a question or a comment.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dan. So, Dan, I disagree that anybody in local government that are not city government would be able to use that technology based on what we're going to pass today. I think the only exception would be the feds, because as we've learned, we have no control over what the federal government does. But I would think that any partnering agency that would be working in cooperation with Portland Police Bureau or PBOT or any other city agency would be prohibited from using that technology as long as they are within the city of Portland boundaries. So unless I get legal advice that that's not true, I would disagree with that reading of this ordinance.
Well, are the experts online who can answer that question? Because that was my understanding, is that you can't prohibit other governments from using technology.
Sure we can. We can prohibit them from using it in Portland, I believe, but let me ask the experts. I'm just not an expert. Hector, are you one of the experts? You just muted yourself, Hector. You're taking lessons from the mayor.
Oh no, that's a low blow.
The double mute.
I said it with love, Mayor.
Well, first of all, we want to appreciate Dan's feedback. We understand from what kind of concerns they're coming from, and we are working on that as well. In terms of this ordinance, only apply for city agencies. This ban is not applying to any other jurisdiction. So let's say TREMET, all the counties, Metro, Portland public schools. So this ordinance is only applicable to city bureaus and agencies.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for bringing that up, Dan, because that was not my understanding. Let me just say, Dan, that this is just the very first iteration of the changes that Smart Cities PDX are planning to make. We know that we will be monitoring this implementation, and nothing stops us from making it stronger and better if we find out that there are either public or private actors that are trying to work their way around the city's ban. And so I suspect this will be just the first time the city council votes on strengthening privacy rights for Portlanders as we move forward. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I learn a lot from folks that come and testify at City Hall. So thank you.
Next individual, please, Carla.
Is Matt Kleinman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Matt Kleinman, and I'd like to think I'm a pretty typical Portlander. I moved out here in my early 20s, about a decade and a half ago, worked at food carts, in nonprofits, and then after some grad school, these days I'm a software engineer. I have a deep appreciation for technology, as you'd expect. For instance, we're able to safely have this session during a pandemic, thanks to some of the strides we've made. But let me tell you, my industry is morally bankrupt. While those in government like yourselves and in nonprofits like my background are used to being surrounded by colleagues who ultimately care about doing the right thing, even when we disagree, we can sort of appreciate that my partner, my coworker wants to do the right thing. I can't say that's true in tech all the time. Moving from nonprofits to technology was eye-opening. Suddenly, many of my coworkers, though certainly not all of them, never really cared to stop and think about whether the work they were doing was going to help the world or hurt our neighbors. They were just worried whether it was possible and whether it'd make the company money. The implications didn't really matter. My industry doesn't want a real conversation about the trade-offs of this technology. What does it mean for civil liberties when it's simplistic for an entity to identify every person entering a lawyer's office or a doctor's office? Or what if anti-choice activists train a camera with facial recognition technology on every person walking into an abortion clinic? Industry lobbyists are going to tell you that they don't need regulation, that they're going to make sure their technology isn't misused. But time and time again, tech companies have proven themselves unable to regulate themselves. Look at Facebook's insistence that they were adequately handling misinformation on their platform. And if there was any misinformation, it certainly wouldn't affect an election. Or look at Google's image recognition, which labeled photos of Black people as photos of gorillas. And instead of fixing their technology after it was discovered, they simply stopped letting people search for the term gorilla. Let me be clear, facial recognition disproportionately affects BIPOC individuals because the people working on it are testing it on images of their friends. And frankly, people like me, a white, straight, cis male, are unfortunately far overrepresented in people making this sort of technology. Tech lobbyists will tell you they want some regulation, but this isn't the right regulation. But it turns out the only regulation Silicon Valley has ever been happy with is regulation that is so light and ill-defined that it is effectively meaningless. And while I wish this was handled at a federal level, Congress is missing in action. And so unfortunately, it's left up to you to keep Portlanders safe. I'm a software engineer, and I'm here to tell you that facial recognition can be dangerous. This isn't a situation where you can let some technology get out there and then go fix it later. I go even further and ask you to accept the amendments proposed by Nathan Sheard of the Electronic Frontier Foundation to make both of these even stronger. And I'm asking you to take the right step by banning facial recognition today for both public and private use. Finally, it definitely is important to ban it on the local level for government because I don't trust what Portland police would do with this technology. Night after night, they're arresting peaceful protesters. You see it in the charges. And so I don't want to think about what they would do if they had this technology in their arsenal. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
The next person is Edward Hasbrock.
Welcome, Edward. Edward, are you there? Carl, I don't see him right off the top. Do you see him?
Yeah, he's right at the top. He was unmuted a second ago, but I see he's remuted again.
Edward, you might have remuted yourself. I see him there. Let's go on to the next person and let's see if we can get Edward back.
Certainly. The next person is Alexander Miller.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Well, it's using my Google picture, which isn't my best, but it'll have to do. Hi, I'm Alex Miller. I'm a software engineer. I used to work in video games and have had some experience working on Microsoft's Connect software. I've done a bit of, keeping up on the industry. I'm still in software. I'm just in medical now. What I would definitely like to concur with everyone else that the state-of-the-art facial recognition technology is definitely too flawed to be planning to use on a municipal level. On a private level, people would trust it too much, so both bans definitely would get my immediate support. There are two small facts that I would like to point out that seem to have been overlooked, at least in my following of this issue. The first is that although the front end of the facial recognition system is pretty visible to everyone, the cameras and the actual user interface for people to find these people, the backend systems largely will go unseen, but still very much used. Giant data centers storing hours and hours of video, images, biometric data from people that have been collected and suspected of various things. All of that takes large data center space to store and make any meaningful computations using. So that additional cost rarely ever gets factored into just saying, let's just turn on facial recognition for the city cameras. That data center is going to be using copious amounts of electricity, of water for cooling, and of man hours. So all of those costs additionally should be factored in. Apart from that, we're in the human-caused sixth great extinction event. So anything that greatly increases our carbon emissions, like running that data center for no gain, shouldn't even be considered. The same is kind of being proven out with police body cameras, and that the storage of that data is costing more than what we're seeing for actually getting from any sort of body cam improvements of police. Those are basically my only other 2 points. I would encourage you to greatly consider what the Electronic Freedom Foundation has to say about other pitfalls using this technology, but the facial recognition technology doesn't see Black people seems to be rather well covered at this point.
Thank you, Alexander. Appreciate your testimony.
Edward Hasbrock is reconnected.
Oh, good. All right. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you. My name is Edward Hasbrook, and I am joining you from San Francisco on behalf of the Identity Project, which is part of a larger Civil Liberties and Human Rights Federation, a foundation. Our project focuses on the human right to freedom of movement and travel. I've testified on this issue before the TSA, other federal government agencies, and as an invited expert before international agencies, including the Canadian and European parliaments and the UN Human Rights Committee. Here to speak to thank you from San Francisco for your technical and policy leadership. This is a much better set of ordinances than what was adopted here in San Francisco, and to speak strongly in support both of the ordinances introduced under items 703 and 704, as well as the amendments recommended by our friends at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. As experts in the particular uses of facial recognition as part of means for identifying, surveilling, and controlling travelers, I want to speak specifically to a letter that I understand you received from the Port of Portland. And I want to thank and congratulate you for not acceding to the request of the port to carve out some kind of exception for use of biometrics at the Portland airport. I think it's particularly important to understand in the case of the airport that there is no use of biometrics to identify passengers at airports that's going on, whether what's already going on now at Portland Airport or what is contemplated in use at other airports and what was proposed to you by the Port of Portland. All of these uses, even when they appear to be being carried out by the airport or by airlines, actually rely on a software as a service model in which the first things that happens, even if the cameras are airport cameras or the cameras are airline cameras, the first thing that happens is that the photographs are passed to DHS. You cannot sever use of facial recognition at airports from its inherent role in current systems as part of the DHS system of compiling galleries of photos that are then used for other purposes, including to track down immigrants and other kinds of purposes. And I don't think I need to tell Portlanders today that you don't want to have the city collaborating or allow private entities at places of public accommodation, particularly ones as central as the airport, collaborating in DHS surveillance of Portlanders and visitors to your fine city. The DHS is a rogue agency with a demonstrated history of disregard for the law in their existing use of biometrics at airports. A petition from the Portland-based World Privacy Forum for them to establish a regulatory framework for this use has been pending and ignored for 2 years. The existing uses of biometrics at airports around the country fail to comply with even the minimal requirements of the Paperwork Reduction Act for OMB approval and OMB notices so that people would even know what's going on, which creates the real hazard that
That's 3 minutes.
People may think that they're cooperating or having their face used by an airline or airport and not realize that this is actually part of a DHS surveillance system, collaboration with which would go directly contrary to Portland's status as a sanctuary city. So I urge you to enact both of these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. We appreciate your participation.
Next is Jonathan Isaacs.
Greetings. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go, Jonathan.
Okay. Hello, my name is John Isaacs, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Portland Business Alliance. I'm also a resident of Portland's wonderful Montevilla neighborhood. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners for the opportunity to testify today. The Alliance is Greater Portland's Chamber of Commerce and represents the largest, most diverse network of businesses in the region. The Alliance advocates for business at all levels of government to support commerce, community health, and the region's overall prosperity. We represent nearly 1,900 members from 27 counties, 13 states, and virtually every industry sector. More than 80% of our members are small businesses. I would like to restate what I communicated at the council work session on this issue back in January. The Alliance agrees that the City of Portland should do the collaborative work necessary to protect residents and visitors from having their biometric data collected without their consent for commercial purposes. And we strongly agree that we should adopt policies that prevent the use of technology that produce racially discriminatory outcomes. Neither is acceptable, are serious problems, and we are committed to continuing to work with all stakeholders to develop a comprehensive policy that encourages innovation in developing technology that improves both the lives of Americans and is consistent with these shared values. We are supportive of the process and goals outlined in both ordinances to get to this goal of bringing this more comprehensive policy to the council in the future, which can replace these short-term fix ordinances that you will act on today. Hector Dominguez and the entire Smart City team have been fantastic to work with, and we have successfully narrowed our list of outstanding issues to 3 areas: areas that we look forward to continuing to work with the city on during implementation. I quickly want to just outline those for you now. First of all, we hope that changes will be made that will add clear language that expressly excludes the use of mobile devices by individuals and visitors in places of public accommodation. Secondly, we hope that clear language will be added in the future that will allow the use of facial recognition technology for individual opt-in experiences such as automated hotel check-in or ticket verification, uses that have nothing to do with surveillance, involuntary data collection, or access. This is particularly important to the local bricks and mortar business community. And third, we hope to work with the team to clearly identify specific industries, such as financial institutions, that are exempt from the ordinance due to superseding state and federal regulations. Overall, this has been a collaborative process throughout, and we are committed to working on these issues through to completion. I want to be clear, we are not opposed today to the addition of an emergency clause to item 704. You have our commitment to being a collaborative partner and a partner in development of a strong and durable privacy policy that can eventually take the place of what we hope will be temporary bans on a specific technology. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I just the partnership and thank you for the collaborative spirit in which you're here today. And the three items you mentioned, I think, are worthy of follow-up conversations. And has been noted, we are getting in front of a technology that's still evolving to protect the people in our city. And the approach that you and your colleagues at the Portland Business Alliance have taken is one that we really appreciate. It's a partnership. We will continue the conversation. We'll continue to work together. And we thank you for your support up to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That's greatly appreciated.
Next is Alan Hippolito.
Hey, Alan.
Hi, folks. Just going to put on my own little timer. Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Alan Hippolito. I work for SUMA, a nonprofit organization. Per its mission statement, SUMA creates platforms for digital organizing, enterprise, and justice. In the words of your friend and mine, Ray España, it's a blessing to be here with you today. To start, I would like to state our strong support for the public ban and the private ban being considered today. I'd also like to reinforce the testimony of others, including CARE Oregon, Freedom to Thrive, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who had offered specific reasons why each ban is important and are identifying key questions that remain. I would also like to take this opportunity to reiterate and expand upon 2 points from my testimony during your January 28th work session. First, let's be clear what we're saying today. Facial recognition technology places Portlanders at risk, especially frontline community members, and so requires an urgent and declarative response by this council. That response is a ban. And we're asking you to enact these bans pursuant to your most basic governing responsibility, fundamental responsibilities like promoting health, safety, and general welfare for and with all Portlanders. Second, these bans must launch the critical good work of building an inclusive, transparent, and robust technology policymaking structure in the city of Portland. That work must invest in those communities on the front lines of technological change so they can lead us to a just and community-centered digital future. Therefore, I'm especially interested in and supportive of the council direct sections of each ban, including Section D in the private ban and Section I in the public ban, which speak to upcoming policymaking processes, comprehensive frameworks, meaningful public participation, and a focus on underserved communities. We're ready to work with the city and community to transition from a patchwork of tech activities and staff spread across multiple bureaus where frontline communities race to get caught up and weigh in, to a well-designed participatory system for governing in the face of rapid technological change. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony.
Next is Darren Harold Golden.
Hi, Darren.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yep, you're good to go.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members Hardesty, Fritz, and Udaly. My name is Darren Golden. I'm a born and raised Portlander, so yes, I do walk in the rain to get overpriced coffee. I would like to reiterate some of my points that I made back in January during my testimony. The opposition to these bans will say that FRT could be good, that we need to wait to see if this can be made better, that the algorithms can be made perfect, and we can remove almost all of the discrepancies that have to do with the racially biased system that already is in place, and that we can make this perfect and make society a better place. All of that is wrong. You cannot consent to having your facial recognition, your facial data taken by a camera on any public access way, ever. You just can't. It's not possible. Children cannot consent. So even if we did get to a point where an adult was able to consent by some way, shape, or form, a child would not be able to consent. Consent is a huge issue when it comes to any biometric data, and facial recognition technology steps far over that boundary. We also should not be looking to pass any constitutionally questionable policies in the city. A facial recognition technology ban will absolutely keep us along the lines of doing our best to adhere to the Constitution that was set forth. Facial recognition technology is overstepping in many cities that are already using it, and we want to stop that before it happens here in Portland. The databases to which facial recognition technology is applied are plagued by racial disparities and other biases, which generate copycat biases in face recognition data. So the rights that are endangered by the use of force technology outweighs the purported benefits. I don't want to live in a city that says any easy way to get onto a plane or a simple way to check into a hotel that makes it faster is worth more than an individual's privacy or the public's privacy as a whole. Yeah, that's my argument.
All right, thanks, Darren. We appreciate it.
Next is Leah Holland.
Good afternoon, Leah.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm here to speak as a North Portland voter and also as an activist with Fight for the Future, a national digital rights nonprofit with 2.8 million members nationally and 24,000 in the Portland area. We believe that facial recognition is fundamentally incompatible with a free society and will impact our world on the same scale as nuclear weapons. Our advocacy has caused Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and over 60 more campuses, as well as the biggest event producers in the country, to back away from this technology because they recognize that facial recognition and surveillance enables racism, surveillance enables authoritarianism, and surveillance demands conformity. In one instance, we ran UCLA faculty through Amazon's recognition with a K, and they misidentified Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who developed the theory of intersectionality, matching her with 100% certainty with a mugshot. I'm certain you've read the studies that show inherent racism in these systems. Knowing their technology made them a target, this summer, Amazon did a PR stunt to dodge pressure by saying they would suspend police use of their facial recognition system for a year. But yet here they are in Portland, greasing the system with $24,000 to lobby against these bills because they as a company have made a fundamental investment in surveillance and thus in racism and thus in authoritarianism and thus in conformity. Corporate use of facial recognition has the potential to be just as dangerous and discriminatory as government and law enforcement use, but with the motivation to manipulate consumers instead of oppress them. These companies are drooling to exploit all the personal details only facial recognition could unlock. And to counter one of the Portland Business Alliance's key points, even seemingly innocuous uses, like speeding up lines or using your face as a form of payment, normalize the act of handing over sensitive biometric information and pose a serious threat to security and civil liberties. Imagine being misidentified as a shoplifter at Rite Aid, and then when you go to pick up your prescription, the doors won't open. No court, no recourse, just an algorithm purposely made too complex to scrutinize. Here in Portland, we've seen freedom of expression being treated as grounds for punishment. BLM protesters in New York and Miami and more have been singled out using facial recognition because this tech is opaque by design. We don't know if this is happening in Portland. This is the perfect tech for tyranny. It is perfect for public control. Passing these bans is how you stand against fascism. And I have to say that after a year in the trenches, a year of fearing this oppressive tech, I stand before my city councilors so proud that my city might pass the strongest ban in the country. I cannot urge you to do so enough and to adopt the improvement EFF and CopWatch have put forward either now or as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate your testimony.
Next is Jacob Parker.
Hey, Jacob.
Hey, my name is Jake Parker. Thanks, Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. I work for the Security Industry Association. We are a nonprofit association representing businesses that provide security products and services throughout the U.S., including Oregon, including many of the leading developers of facial recognition. So I'd like to share some concerns we have with both of the proposed ordinances currently drafted, but I want to say something. There's been a lot of talk about and concern about surveillance uses, and I just want to say that we do not support and would not support the use of this technology for mass surveillance by the government. And in fact, that's not happening in our country right now, and there's many constitutional limitations there. But I think a ban is an extreme measure that is unnecessary and is not in the public interest. And the way it's written currently would sweep in many uses of facial recognition that have absolutely nothing to do with surveillance. There's many benefits of this technology that are proven, and there's thousands of success stories that stretch back over a decade. We heard one from Edith earlier today, and we've detailed a number of successes on our website, including one case in Oregon where it was used to help apprehend a person who sexually assaulted a minor, and the case went cold for 16 years. So any technology can be abused. I think a ban precludes the opportunity to enact policies to ensure the technology is only used for appropriate, acceptable ways, in a way that would preserve its benefits while taking potential uses of concern off the table. We're already working with other jurisdictions around the country on ways this can be done, and exploring that. We've also outlined many of the things that could be done in our principles for responsible and effective use of the technology can be found on our website. So as many of the folks spoke about earlier today, the draft ordinances reflect a real concern that use of the technology could negatively impact women and minorities. This is a serious issue that industry needs to address. Using accurate technology matters. Only the highest performing technology should be used, highest performing across demographic groups. So the US government through NIST has conducted extensive research and shown a wide variation of algorithms that are at various stages of development, from purely experimental to those that are deployed in actual systems that can be bought. And this is an issue that industry will have and will continue to address. But often lost is the fact that the highest performing technologies in that study showed no difference across demographic groups. Those are also the same technologies that are used in some of the more prominent public sector programs and many of the private sector ones. So importantly, though, I think the council should consider that banning this technology would actually eliminate a tool that would help keep human bias in check. So many law enforcement, for example, believe that it can reduce the impact of unnecessary police-civilian encounters in communities where there's been strained relations. Human eyewitness accounts are notoriously inaccurate and have led to the vast majority of misarrests and misincarcerations. That's misidentifications by human eyewitnesses. The government has also conducted research that proves that combining use of facial recognition with trained examiners actually gives you the most accurate identification results.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll just say that we'd love to talk with you further and work with you any way that we can be helpful. And again, stress that this is going to affect many non-controversial uses that have wide public support.
Thank you, Jacob, for your perspective. We appreciate it.
Next is Andrew Kingman.
Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks, everybody. Can folks hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. My name is Andrew Kingman. I'm General Counsel of the State Privacy and Security Coalition, and I'm also Senior Managing Attorney in DLA Piper's Privacy and Cybersecurity Practice Group, which means that I'm here not only as an advocate, but as somebody who helps counsel companies through various privacy laws. I'm familiar with these issues, not just through our work in all 50 states, but also through my work as an intertable member of the Oregon Attorney General's Privacy Task Force, which met regularly for the past year to discuss and respectfully consider the various perspectives around data privacy issues. The events of the past year have brought into sharper relief than ever the need for public policy that more clearly takes into account the risk of discriminatory outcomes. And our coalition is working hard to ensure that our positions reflect and address these considerations, would welcome the opportunity to partner with the city to move towards regulation that all stakeholders view as workable and effective in this regard. We'd offer 3 amendments today for both the private and sector proposed ordinances that we believe both accord with the drafter's intent and achieve the proper respect for both civil rights and innovation. The first is a much clearer exclusion of household and consumer uses without clear language to this effect. The ordinance will be can be read to ban everyday features that consumers expect. This includes organizing photos or a secure login for things like online banking or other types of accounts that consumers can securely log into. We'd also suggest clarifying the definitions of face recognition technology and surveillance technology. Again, this is not to create a loophole, but just to be much clearer and accurate about the type of technology that this ordinance gets at. Face recognition technology needs to focus on technology that actually identifies individuals rather than simply matching features of unknown individuals. Facial detection is not the same thing as facial recognition. And so it's important to, I think, work on a definition and clarify that definition to be a little bit more accurate. The surveillance technology definition needs to be significantly modified so that it focuses on surveillance, not just the wide range of general purpose technologies as drafted. It currently would sweep in technologies that have nothing to do with facial recognition, like thermometers or landline phones. And so these definitions, we believe, should be just a little bit clearer here. And the last piece would be a very limited security exemption. This would allow businesses to protect themselves and their workers from theft or damage. But we would also support a strong limitation on both the use of that technology as well as the ability to share that technology with law enforcement. We would propose that businesses be limited if they are using data for that purpose, that they be prohibited from using it for additional purposes, and that they not be permitted to share with law enforcement. Thanks very much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions. And we'll also, I should say, we'll also be sending these red lines over in the next day or two here.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We appreciate that. And I would also welcome getting that in writing, so thanks for doing that.
Next is Ricardo Luan Valerio.
Hi, Ricardo.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler, members of the council. My name is Ricardo Luan Valerio. I am the Director of Advocacy for Latino Network. I want to thank the Office of Commissioner Hardesty for really working on this issue for over a year now. I remember first engaging in this work as a policy associate at the ACLU of Oregon, and really want to thank also the partners at SUMA, Urban League, and other community leaders to make this policy come to fruition. I think a lot of the speakers early on addressed a lot of the points I wanted to make, so I'll just really narrow it down to 3 main ones. The first one is on the impact to immigrant communities. It's been pretty apparent the way in which the federal government and other government entities have used facial recognition technology to incite fear into immigrant communities. More specifically, the way in which they've engaged DMV records and other data bases across the nation with facial recognition technology in order to identify potential immigrants within those jurisdictions. Those are practices that are prohibited here in Oregon in multiple ways, but I think that the way in which the city of Portland is approaching the policy on its public proposal really reemphasizes the commitment to the immigrant community and the safety of the immigrant community when it comes to their information and their privacy, as well as ensuring trust within our government here locally for immigrants that, quite frankly, in today's world, do not trust government in any level. An additional point is about addressing the noble aspect of privacy laws and privacy issues when also addressing constitutional issues. In my prior employment, it became very clear how these issues have not really been addressed both in policy and law. And the policy is really falling behind to the development of this kind of technology. So Portland has really taken a significant step, both in the public and private sector, to really create a good framework and good pathways to addressing technology, privacy, and security for our communities, especially when there's a lack of consent on the use, the sale, and transfer of data of those individuals, which leads me to my last point. And I really appreciate Commissioner Hardesty addressing this throughout this meeting. This is just the starting point, whether it's just within the public, the facial recognition policies. This is just the first iteration, which needs to continue to develop. But really what we need to address is biometric data collection in general. And we've seen different frameworks in which we can start working with. Illinois, the state of Illinois passed wonderful state law that I think has become a pretty good beacon of significant progress on this matter. So I really commend the city for addressing this issue, for taking up these two matters, and really encourage the conversations to develop beyond just facial recognition technology and to biometric data in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Next is Skip Newberry.
Hello, Skip.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep, thanks for your patience.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor Wheeler, City Commissioners, my name is Skip Newberry, and I serve as President and CEO of the Technology Association of Oregon. We represent nearly 500 tech and tech-enabled companies in the region, and we've been working closely with the city on digital inclusion and data privacy issues over many years. We also work closely with the state of Oregon, including the Attorney General's Office on data privacy policy. We are not here to testify in opposition to either the proposed public ban or the private ban. And after conversations with city staff, we're on the same page with the city's intent behind these measures. Our members do, however, think that the private ban could benefit from some clarifying language to make sure the language in the ordinance matches the intent. And Andy Kingman from the State Privacy and Security Coalition, as well as John from the PBA, I think covered in detail some areas where more work is ongoing in terms of clarifying language with the private use ban. And the goal there is to hopefully reduce any remaining ambiguity for local businesses that are trying to comply with the ordinances. We also want to take just a brief moment to thank the Smart City PDX team and council staff from Commissioner Hardesty's office and the mayor's office for their work on these ordinances. The process has been very collaborative to date, and we really appreciate the back and forth over many months. And so we hope to continue working with city staff as we move into the implementation phase. And thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Skip. Thanks for the great work your organization does.
Thank you.
The last person I show is Christopher Howell.
Christopher Howell, last but not least, welcome. Christopher, you're still muted. Can you try and unmute again, please? Is Christopher, is he calling in, Carla?
Looks like he's on a computer.
Okay, and Christopher, you probably know this, but if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the mute button there. Click on that, that might work. Although this happened to me the other day on a Zoom meeting. I couldn't unmute, even though I knew how to do it. Christopher, we still can't hear you. If you can hear me, you're still muted. If you're on a phone, try *6. If you're just on your computer, try scrolling down to the lower right or the lower left. There should be a mute button. Let's see, is he telling us anything on chat? Christopher, if you have access to the chat.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Good. We hear you. Great. We hear you, Christopher.
Oh, sorry. I was having a, can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. I would like to express a conditional support for this ordinance, but I have concerns. The Portland police have shown no interest in following laws meant to restrain them. Just last night, they didn't declare an unlawful assembly, and yet they were deploying tear gas and assaulting people. I have no confidence that telling them they can't use facial recognition will mean they won't. And I have another question, a question we can perhaps answer, which is I'm involved with developing facial recognition to in fact use on Portland police officers, since they are not identifying themselves to the public and they are committing crimes. Would this become illegal if you pass this ordinance? Then I feel like that is a concern. We should have an exception that public employees who are breaking the law can be identified this way. I have to say that honestly, I already expect extrajudicial retribution from the police department for working on this project, but I fear that you're going to enshrine it into judicial retribution. And that's pretty much all I have. I think the underlying idea here is sound. I think the concerns of security folks and the Business Alliance are overrated when the Portland police are willing to break the law to enforce their will. So and excuse me, taking a break from I'm out here working on the census, so had to get some more quiet. But I just really think that an ordinance like this, when we're living with daily lawlessness from the Portland police, is, that needs to be addressed. And Ted Wheeler, you say that Joanne Hardesty can't be police commissioner because she doesn't have the right reputation, and meanwhile you have a 60% disapproval rate in Portland.
I did not.
So that's about all I have.
Not mischaracterize my position. I have never said that about Commissioner Hardesty.
Well, I can read you the quote.
Let's.
But it doesn't matter. It's.
We've heard your testimony. We got your point.
All right, and I would like a response about the potential use of the technology on the police.
On or by?
By citizens to identify officers.
Well, it's a little creepy, but I suppose we could get legal counsel to chime in on that issue. Do we? The question was asked by Christopher whether or not that would be banned under these proposals. Can we get an opinion from one of the experts on that? Welcome.
Yes.
Save us.
Individuals can actually use face recognition. This is intended to be on more like based on the public accommodations, which is intended to be for enterprises and companies.
What about a nonprofit?
A nonprofit, it is a violation. It is part of the public accommodations framework, yes. But the individuals, they can use it.
If I may ask the question, Hector, when you say an individual can use it, so I can walk around and I can film people and I can buy facial recognition technology to find out who they are and then do background checks on them?
Based on the current state of the policy, and it's based on public accommodations, so it's only applicable to enterprises. Yeah.
So if I'm walking down the street and I'm not a commissioner and I'm just walking down the street filming people with the purpose of using it with my own private facial recognition technology program, are you telling me that would be legal?
So, yeah, this is a little bit tricky.
I know. This is why I didn't want us all to walk out of here with different understandings of what you just said.
Yeah, exactly. Because there is a service on the back end that is providing that. So,
right, so they've got to get it from a company, right?
Exactly. In this case, the company would be in violation, but not the individual.
Thank you. That helps. And Christopher, I will say that in order to purchase this technology, there would have to be a request that would come to the city council. And since the city council is already about to, I believe, ban the use of this technology, we would not in any way support Portland Police buying this technology. So I don't think worry that Portland police officers will own. They don't own body cams. I've worked very hard to make sure they never owned any, and they don't, except for apparently they've got some for dogs, but that's another conversation.
Ma'am?
Yes.
May I just say that my concern was as much that the police would individually use their personal cell phones, which they've been seen recording protesters, and as was said here, use individual services. And I would also like to point out, as far as the company goes, I am writing and training my own neural net software that I developed to do this. So I wouldn't be purchasing it from anyone else. So there wouldn't be a company breaking the law if I did it.
I would just
understand the nonprofit level, but
Christopher, I would just recommend you get a legal opinion. You don't want to accidentally.
Of course, yes.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony, though.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
All right. Well, on that note, Carly, does that complete our public testimony?
Yes, Mayor, that's all who signed up.
All right, very good. Colleagues, any further questions that we would like to ask or any further discussion that we'd like to have on either of these ordinances? This would be the appropriate time.
Mayor, I just wanted to confirm that we read the two ordinances together.
Correct.
And we've heard all of the testimony, and then we take two separate votes.
That is correct. And we have an amendment on the table for 704, the emergency clause.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I don't see any further discussion, so we'll start with item 703. This is regarding city bureaus and the use of face recognition technologies. This is an emergency ordinance. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Give me just a moment, Carla. I have some really wonderful words I want to say, so I want to make sure I don't miss my opportunity to do so. I want to first take the opportunity to really appreciate Smart Cities PDX for the thoughtfulness, for the diverse outreach, for the intentionality that has been used in order to make sure that we were hearing from people in all perspectives around this legislation. I am very proud of the work that has been done, and I want to really honor and highlight Hector. Because Hector, you've been working on this for a very, very, very long time. I want to acknowledge the fabulous work that Judith Mallory has done in bringing this to where it is today. And I want to appreciate Markeisha Smith, Dr. Markeisha Smith, because Markeisha Smith, doctor, we have been asking you to do a lot of late. Because of how we have shifted our priorities here at the city of Portland. And let me say, not once have you disappointed us. Not once have you not come through. Not once have you not provided us some very thoughtful, detailed advice that improved whatever policy we were working on. We are very fortunate at the city of Portland to have you here, Dr. Smith, and I just want to acknowledge that at this time. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge Derek Bradley, who, you know, I got to tell you, every one of my staff people are absolutely fabulous, but Doug Bradley over and over again actually reminds me why I wanted him so bad on my staff. The work that he has done through a whole bunch of different various constituents is absolutely phenomenal. And I want to make sure that I take that opportunity. All of you know I'm not usually patting my staff on the back because I just expect them to be fabulous, and they all are. But sometimes I want to take the moment to really acknowledge that we've got folks that go above and beyond over and over and over again, and they just do it because that's the people they are. We are here today, let's be clear, because what we heard when we first started this conversation was fear. We heard fear of community members being able to go into a convenience store without their biometric data being gathered. We heard fear about community members not being able to go to a store without having their face actually targeted in some internal database determining whether they were safe enough to go in and spend their money. We have heard fear from immigrants and refugee communities about whether or not they would be forcefully targeted if we in fact allow this technology to continue to expand as it has been. I will say I'm also grateful to the technology folks who spoke today, who actually acknowledged the flaws in their technology and spoke in favor of us having this ban in place. This will not be the last time we talk about technology or facial recognition technology. I absolutely agree with some people who have testified that just because it gets better doesn't mean it's something that we as a city should actually implement and support. And so I am grateful that my colleagues have all been really open to really understanding the fear that this kind of technology provides. All of us have experienced a lot since number 45 sent his federal goons in. Was that about a month ago now? And I can tell you, all of my technology works different since all those little planes have been up collecting our data around protests. This is really about making sure that we are prioritizing our most vulnerable community members and community members of color. We already know that they are always the ones that are the most impacted and the hardest to recover from the new technology. I'm proud of this city council that we have been pretty firm and pretty committed from the very first time we had our very first meeting. And I just want to say thank you to each of my colleagues, to all the people who worked, all the people who even didn't agree at the beginning or don't agree today. I want to thank you all because I believe what we're passing is model legislation that the rest of the country will be emulating as soon as we have completed our work here. And again, this is the beginning. It is not the end. I know Smart City PDX has a lot more work to do, and I'm excited about the ability to partner with them to continue to make sure that the city of Portland is a place that is very protective of the privacy of all of our community members. We own our privacy, and it's our obligation to make sure that we are not allowing people to gather it up secretly and then sell it off for either profit or for fear-based activities. I am very pleased to vote aye.
You Daly.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hardesty.
On me.
I had it hidden. Okay, have your laugh. Have your laugh.
I'm good. I'm back.
Now I've hidden my face. Okay.
My face is gone, right?
Everything's okay. All right. As with many products, this technology was designed with white men as the golden standard, making the rest of us, women and BIPOC community members, deviations from the norm, I guess, despite the fact that we are the majority of the population. And we're more likely to be misidentified and potentially harmed by this technology. Facial recognition is a runaway train running over our rights and endangering our communities in the name of profit, using fear as fuel. They claim their technology will make us safer. 1984 by George Orwell is a dystopian novel, not a business plan. A cursory search yields numerous accounts of misidentifications and rampant abuse, including the Clearview scandal, which revealed that although they claimed their technology would only be provided to law enforcement, they were allowing their wealthy investors to use it as a personal spy toy. They were also caught scraping social media and many other types of sites for photos to add to their database. And despite claims we heard in public testimony today, in Maryland, ICE used facial recognition technology on millions of drivers' photos without a court order. It's clear to me that we cannot trust the industry or government agencies to use this technology appropriately, and it's incumbent upon us, local elected leaders, to protect our community from their abuse. These are unacceptable and irresponsible practices. These companies should be ashamed of themselves for unleashing this flawed technology on our communities, further endangering some of our most vulnerable community members. How many times have we heard of wrongful arrests, assaults, convictions, and deaths of Black boys and men because they resembled a suspect. These are the very people who are most likely to be misidentified by this technology. Technology should not amplify existing bias and perpetuate racism. It can and should be a tool to help solve for these social ills. There are glimmers of hope. Amazon and Microsoft have put a moratorium on selling this technology to law enforcement. IBM is getting out of the facial recognition business altogether. I encourage all of them to withdraw their fatally flawed products from the market and get out of the business. And in the meantime, they can get out of our city. I am grateful to Commissioner Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler for developing and advancing these items, as well as the work of OEHR, Smart Cities PDX, and other organizations and advocates. We join just a handful of major American cities that have banned facial recognition technology, and I hope that our actions here today inspire more cities to take up this issue. I'm proud to be a member of a council and a resident of a city that is putting our community members' safety, privacy, and civil rights before corporate profit. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Well, let's be clear. This is it's going to be a nationally recognized policy. And Commissioner Hardesty and her staff have done an absolutely fantastic job of working with every single member of the council with Mayor Wheeler's support to bring it forward. I echo your kudos for Derek Bradley. I kind of almost got tired of the number of times he kept checking back to make sure that see if we had any questions and or any concerns. And certainly you've been very responsive to the community as well. And so that's evidenced by the support we've heard today and by their unanimous support at the City Council. You know, there's a lot of unrest in our country right now, and a lot of policies and practices where individual members of this council have differences of opinion. This is a really good example of the commission form of government led by a mayor who supports individual commissioners in bringing significant policies, and then the commissioner working with each member of the council to make sure that we all understand what it is and get the support. So I am excited about this for multiple reasons. The principle of the issue has been well documented and spoken about today. Thank you, Hector Dominguez and Andrea Durbin in the Office of Planning and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Judith Maurer in the Office of Equity, and Dr. Markeisha Smith. And I echo Commissioner Hardesty's kudos. I was thinking back, Commissioner Hardesty, just before you were sworn in, Mayor Wheeler and I interviewed the candidates for the Director of the Office of Equity and Human Rights with you, which we were able to do because we didn't have a quorum because you weren't official yet. I would have to say that was one of the first great things that you have done for our council and for our community. And I certainly appreciate the partnership and the way that we work together. There's been a lot of discussion in the press about, you know, where we disagree. And it's really important to note how much we have agreed today, how much we agree last week, how much we will agree next week, and how we all care about the city of Portland. We care about the people of Portland, particularly those who have been so impacted by racist policies and practices in the past. And we're all committed to working together to address those issues, including the police. And I appreciate that, you know, that there has been support on the police for this ban as well. There's been no pushback from them either. So there are certainly challenges that we need to solve with our community, and Portlanders are well equipped to do that. And we will continue to lead them as a council to the best of our ability, acknowledging that we are a community that works together. It's not any one person or any one group of people even. It's all of us needing to figure out what are the challenges and how are we going to address them together. So I'm very, very, very pleased and thankful to vote aye.
Wheeler?
I stand with my colleagues, in fact, the entire community on this matter. The dangers and the inequities in the current technology are present and clear. We've heard good testimony on this today as well as during the work session. Portlanders should never be in fear of having their right and privacy be exploited by either their government or by a private institution. As I stated before, all Portlanders and frankly, all people are entitled to a city government that will not use technology with a demonstrated racial and gender bias, which endangers personal privacy. That should be a given. Technology exists to make our lives easier, not for public and private entities to use as a weapon against the very citizens that they serve and accommodate. With no state or federal regulations on the horizon, it's up to cities to take the lead in protecting its most vulnerable populations. With the passage of this legislation today, we join cities like Boston, Oakland, San Francisco, and others in taking a proactive step, ensuring that our communities know that we understand the harmful effects of technology and will never subject them to that harm. What makes Portland's legislation stand out from other of these cities is that we're prohibiting facial recognition technology use by private entities in places of public accommodation. This is the first of its kind legislation in the nation, and I believe in the world. It's not an exaggeration to say this is a truly historic day for the city of Portland. Portlanders deserve peace of mind. They deserve transparency from private institutions, just as they do public institutions. This is a step in achieving that goal, and this is consistent with the brand and the reputation of this city as being a city that is creative, a city that is collaborative, a city that is innovative, and a city that's willing to lead. It's my hope that other cities, large and small, in this nation and across the globe, will follow suit. If you follow this subject, you will have heard certain cities recently using this technology to target protesters and specific individuals. This is not what we want in Portland. That is not a Portland value. That is not consistent with the brand of this city. And we've heard a lot of talk today about equity and inclusion, and those too are hallmarks of the Portland brand. We're not going to allow that kind of abuse to take place in our city because our city won't tolerate it. Portland needs to know that its leaders are listening and that the public safety and data privacy and security issues are paramount in the work that we do. But this work is not just done. This, as has been said, is just the first step in expanding the city's work on digital justice and data security. And yes, those are terms you're going to hear a lot more about in the years ahead, not just the data security, but the concept of digital justice. And that's an area that, again, is consistent with where the city wants to go and consistent with our record of innovation and leadership. With that in mind, I want to thank the many people who have been involved in this year-long project. The city's strength is truly in its amazing employees. I want to thank the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And I'd like to specifically thank the Smart Cities PDX team. Kevin, Hector, and Christine lead the Smart Cities initiative, support their bureau, and you guys have been on point since the very beginning. Thank you. That's amazing work. And Andrea Durbin from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Director Markeisha Smith from the Office of Equity and Human Rights. Thank you for all of your important leadership on this project. And I, of course, want to thank Judith Mowbray from the Office of Equity and Human Rights. Judith, as we all know, has a wealth of knowledge about the city, is an amazing advocate for the community. We also have Asen Onart from the city attorney's office to thank. She had the unenviable task of ensuring the legality of both of these proposed pieces of legislation. So again, I want to thank Asen. That is a hard task indeed, because just as the technology is emerging, there are many aspects of the underlying law that is also emerging, and you are helping us to lead the way. I want to thank the Portlanders and organizations who've given their voices, input, expertise, and time into helping craft something that directly impacts them and their communities. The importance of collaboration between local governments and their communities can never be overstated enough. And I want to thank those from other cities, Seattle and Oakland and elsewhere, who testified to help us strengthen our ordinances based on your learning experience. Finally, I want to thank my colleagues on the council and their teams for their efforts and their supports in this. I want to acknowledge Commissioner Hardesty and her policy director, Derek Bradley. Specifically, Commissioner Hardesty has been a passionate advocate on this issue from the very start, And Derek, aside from being the best dressed individual at Portland City Hall, has also spent countless hours partnering with my staff and helping to bring this forward into its final version today. So I want to thank both of you. Obviously, I'm very happy to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Now, Carla, if you could please call the roll on the amendment to item number 704. That's the addition of the emergency clause.
Hardesty?
Muted. Rare day when I get that
for you, Mayor.
I feel completely validated. My day is complete.
I did it to make you feel better, Mayor. That's all. Aye.
You Daly?
Aye.
Fritz?
I appreciate adding the clause so that people can see and finish this up today. Congratulations. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted to the main motion as amended. Please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
You Daly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Hooray. Aye.
Wheeler?
I'll second that. Hooray. And I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for those of you who presented and testified today. And with that, colleagues, we are adjourned.
Don't we have another one?
Oh, wait, do we? Stop.
We're in 2?
I don't see another.
That's tomorrow we have 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought,
Like that.
I thought there was the private and the public.
We just voted on both.
Oh, together.
Yeah, do you want to do it again? I mean, we finished it.
I just wanted to make sure. We've been working on this for too long to walk out of here and think that we forgot something. No? Are we good?
We're all good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, since we're done, let me just appreciate the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, because that was one of the people I left off my list, but this would not have been possible without the leadership of the Bureau and Andrea Durbin and her wonderful leadership to bring us to this point. And so I am happy. You were so darn good. I didn't know we did 2 in one fell swoop. Very cool. Okay, I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.